So today, we're going to dive into this really fascinating book from way back in 1906. It's by a writer named William Walker Atkinson, and he came up with this radical, almost unbelievable, way of looking at the universe. He basically claimed that everything, from the tiniest atom to the biggest star, is all driven by one single force, a living, thinking mind.
Right from the very beginning, Atkinson just throws down the gauntlet. He's saying, look, this isn't just philosophy. He believed he'd found a grand unification theory, something that connected ancient mysticism with the absolute cutting-edge physics of his day. He was convinced he saw a common thread that pretty much everyone else was missing.
And this, right here, is the central mystery we're going to try and unravel. How could one single idea, the idea that the universe is mind, actually promise to solve the biggest paradoxes that were completely stumping the greatest scientific thinkers of the early 20th century? It sounds impossible, right?
Okay, so to really get how wild Atkinson's solution was, we've got to travel back in time. Let's go to 1906 and look at the problems that were literally keeping scientists up at night. This was a time of huge discovery, but it was also a time of just profound, deep mystery.
So here was the biggest paradox they were facing. On one hand, you have the force of gravity. It seemed to be instantaneous. It didn't need any time to travel, and it didn't seem to need any medium to pass through. But then you have light and heat, which were totally different. They traveled at a very specific speed, and they seemed to need something to travel through, like waves moving through an ocean. How could two fundamental forces of the universe behave in such completely opposite ways?
Well, science's best answer at the time was this hypothetical substance they called the universal ether. But honestly, this idea just created way more problems than it solved. See, for it to work, the ether had to be a perfect fluid so planets could just glide through it without any friction, but at the same time, it had to be more rigid than steel to transmit light waves. Atkinson himself called these properties paradoxical, absurd, and, his word, unthinkable.
So, Atkinson's first move, his first clue to solving all this, was to completely throw out the idea of dead matter. He saw that as the fundamental mistake in all of scientific thinking. For him, the universe wasn't some kind of giant dead machine, it was a living, breathing organism.
His first principle was incredibly simple, but also really profound. He argued that life, and some form of mind, wasn't just something you find in plants and animals. No. He said it exists in everything, in every single rock, every drop of water, every particle of dust.
He saw this clear, continuous line of life and mind, like a staircase. At the top, you've got the complex intellect of humans, and then it steps down through animal instinct to what he called appetency in plants, the way they desire and reach for sunlight. But he didn't stop there. He argued that even minerals show signs of life in the way they form these perfect crystals, and that the ultimate, most basic unit of life and mind was the atom itself.
Now, Atkinson's second big idea, well, this one was even bolder. He claimed that all those different forces that physicists were studying, gravity, cohesion, chemical affinity, they weren't separate forces at all. He said they were all just different names for the exact same thing.
And this is where his thinking gets so simple but so powerful. He just looked at the force pulling planets together, the force holding a rock together, and even what he called the chemical love affairs that bind atoms into molecules. And he just argued, look, these aren't different forces. They're all just different masks worn by one single universal law of attraction.
And this is the crucial point, right here. Atkinson claimed this universal attraction wasn't some blind mechanical pull. It was a mental act. It was an expression of desire, a fundamental action of life and mind. In his view, all force is what he called a vital mental force.
Okay, so now we have the two key ingredients, right? First, a universe that is alive. Second, a single force that is actually mental attraction. Now we can finally see how Atkinson put them together to offer this grand solution to the riddles that physics completely stumped.
So Atkinson just directly confronts that unthinkable ether theory. He asks, okay, if this paradoxical, impossible substance isn't the medium for light and heat, then what is? What could possibly connect everything in the entire cosmos?
His answer was, it was breathtakingly simple, and it completely changed the entire paradigm. The medium of the universe, he said, isn't a physical substance at all. It is an infinite ocean of pure mind.
This cosmic mind, as he called it, wasn't a thing in space. He believed it was space.
It was the fundamental reality that contained everything, and it was the medium through which all force and energy had to be transmitted, not as physical waves, but as mental impulses.
And just like that, with this one idea, that central paradox of physics just dissolves. See, in Atkinson's view, gravity isn't a wave that travels through space. It's a constant, instantaneous, mental bond that is always there between objects. But light and heat? They are waves. They're thought waves of excitement that ripple through this cosmic mind at a finite speed. Suddenly, the two completely different behaviors are explained with one theory. And that contradictory ether, you just don't need it anymore.
But this whole incredible cosmic theory, it wasn't just about stars and atoms. The final piece of this puzzle brings it all right back down to Earth and directly into our own minds.
Atkinson's ultimate point was that we aren't separate from this cosmic system. The human mind isn't just some passive observer. It's an active part of the cosmic mind, and it operates under the very same laws of attraction.
And here is the powerful conclusion to all of this. He believed that our own thoughts, our desires, our fears, they aren't just fleeting ideas floating around in our heads. They are active forces. They operate on that exact same principle of attraction that governs the stars, constantly working to draw people, circumstances, and experiences into our lives.
And this leaves us with a truly provocative question, doesn't it? Over 100 years ago, William Walker Atkinson laid out this vision of the universe as one vast, interconnected mind. If he was even partly right, if thought really is the fundamental force of reality, then it forces us to ask ourselves, what reality are we creating for ourselves right now with our own dynamic thought?